we were getting pretty regular earthquakes, it would stand the hair on the back of your neck up and were alarming, but you got very used to. And then in late February of 2011, there was a big one.
Welcome to the Rivers and Tides podcast, where we have guests on to hear their stories of healing and resiliency through outdoor pursuits. I'm pretty excited about this interview because Austin, who's behind the camera and does all the heavy lifting for us, he's told me a lot about you, so I'm looking forward to this interview quite a bit. Before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so live here in Charleston. My family, a little boy and a little girl that were raised in here. I work for a group that we provide some support to operational efforts in Antarctica. And so that's kind of one of my full-time gigs, and I spend some time in Antarctica and New Zealand every year doing that. And then my wife and I run a photography business. We shoot a lot of weddings, and I do quite a bit of outdoor photography and fly fishing and hunting and that kind of space.
All the fun stuff Charleston has to offer.
Yeah, it's a pretty good way to kind of fit that together, to marry those things together, something you love with something that you get to do and, make a little bit of support for your family with.
That's awesome. Before we get started, going down that road too much, why don't we start out with where you're from originally? Where were you born?
Yeah, I grew up in Virginia, a little town southwest of Richmond. And we lived in a trailer park until I was 8, and we bought a little piece of land out in the country and moved out there and cleared the land ourselves and built a home, moved a trailer out there and started to build a little log home, and was there until kind of went to high school, and then left home shortly after high school.
It's a small high school?
Oh, yeah, tiny. Our graduating class was, I think, under 100 people. The entire school wasn't very large. My younger sister was 10 years younger than me, and when she came up through high school, they had combined like 4 schools, and it was this crazy thing I didn't recognize anymore.
Everyone knew everyone?
Before that, yes. Yeah, everybody knew everybody where I grew up, for sure.
What was high school like? What'd you do in high school? What were you into then? Other than, were you into academic pursuits, or were you into outdoor pursuits more?
Well, I was really good at school without much effort, which is a blessing and a curse, it turns out. So,
I'd say a blessing, because I sure wasn't.
Well, I always did well in school, but I never really learned some of the skills, like, studying skills and kind of ways of applying yourself in certain areas. So that became a challenge at some point later, just not having that foundation there. But I spent a lot of time in the woods. We did a bunch of hunting and fishing, going down to the lake. We did a ton of bass fishing on this farm that we lived near, and all the ponds that they had there. So
a lot of open land. Sounds like it was a pretty beautiful place to, grow up as a kid.
It was tons of forest, and we just spent every waking moment outside and
that's awesome.
Away from the house. Yeah,
I wish that's how things were more for kids these days.
For sure.
Instead of glued to their phones and their PlayStations.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
So what'd you end up doing after high school?
Well, I started out working and doing some things, and started going to community college, and wanted to kind of pursue. I didn't know really what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to go into chemical engineering. Turned out
interesting thing to be interested.
Yeah,
interesting thing to be interested in.
It turns out I don't really know where that came from, but it wasn't me. So I ended up joining the Marine Corps. Spent some time in the Marines. We parted ways after just shy of 10 years.
If you don't mind me asking, what made you? At what point did you decide that you wanted to go into the Marines?
That's a good question. I accompanied a friend who went to a recruiter, and he talked to a Navy recruiter, And so I just drove along with him. And so we talked to the Navy recruiter, and we went next door, and he talked to the Marine recruiter, and came home, and my told my some of my other friends about it, and they said, "A Marine? Like, what are you thinking?" I was like, "I wasn't there. I was just there with him. I was there with him because we were riding around, and he had to go do that. You know, what are you thinking? You can't be a Marine."
Did you enlist that day, or you just talked to him?
No, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I was just there.
You were just along for the ride.
I was just a plus one.
Okay.
We went to the recruiter because we had nothing better to do. He was thinking about joining, and he went to the Navy thinking about that. The Marine recruiter was next door. We talked to the Marine recruiter. I went home, told some friends that we had talked to recruiters, and this is what I heard. "You couldn't be a Marine. What are you talking about?" And I went back the next day and joined up. It was a bit of an impulse decision. My mom was none too happy when I came home and told her about that, and then
She said no, and you said too late. I already signed.
too late. Yeah, I think I announced it at dinner, and she was none too happy. But yeah, it ended up being a really good thing for me. I loved the time that I got to spend with Marine Corps buddies, and I met my now wife through that. So
Yeah, I've mentioned this before that when my dad was a Marine, and after high school, I didn't do very well in high school, and I definitely needed to do something to pull my head out of my ass at the time.
yeah.
And I remember I decided I'm going to join the Marines. I told my dad I'm going to join the Marines, and he said, "You sure you don't want to join the Air Force?" And I was like, "That's supposed to mean."
Right.
But yeah, I ended up going in just a little bit before you did too. But so what'd you do in the Marines? What was your job there?
I was an air traffic controller. So we were in the wing, stationed on the East Coast my whole tenure, and then just did a bunch of deployments after September 11th until when I got out.
You deployed overseas quite a bit.
Yeah.
What are some of the places you went?
We went to Iraq, we went to Afghanistan, and went to Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, was in Djibouti for a while, kind of pretty much got a tour of the whole place.
Yeah. So so you did about 10 years in the Marines. Had you started fishing, fly fishing at that point?
No, we grew up in the country. There was no money for fly fishing,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew anyone that fly fished. So I had spinning rods and bait casting rods, and we catfished and fished for bass and brim, and fly fishing wasn't even on the radar.
Yeah. I like to say, it's a niche sport anyway.
Yeah.
And saltwater fly fishing is kind of a niche within that niche
Right.
itself. So,
Right.
so 10 years, that's halfway to retirement. So did you kind of go at that point? What made you decide, they're kind of on that borderline?
Yeah, the Marine Corps and I parted ways on good terms, and it was just time to go.
Yeah, makes sense.
I had my fun. They definitely had their fun with me, and it was just time for something different.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends and family, when I was talking about, hey, I think I'm going to get out, everybody's like, "What? You're halfway to retirement?" And it was just a thing where.
But that's the time, right? It's like, it's either that's a good decision point. Like, you've done 10 years, it's either get out now or kind of do the whole thing, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it was just time to go. And I questioned it, of course. That was a big move. I questioned leaving that and kind of joining the workforce, and what are we going to do after, and what's the next step, and but it ended up working out.
Yeah, it's a little scary at that point.
Oh, for sure.
Taking pretty big leap to having a lot of stuff provided for you and the job security, and then making that leap out into the unknown. Was that were you married at that point?
I was not.
Okay.
I was with my girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time. So we'd been together for a while. We didn't get married until we'd both gotten out from the Marines.
So where was your last duty station before you got out?
Beaufort. So just down the road.
Yeah.
MCAS Beaufort.
It's a little too close to Paris Island.
Yeah.
But a beautiful place too. Beaufort's really nice.
I loved it. We didn't want to leave. So when we got out of the Marines, we were waiting for jobs. We kind of applied to the FAA, and that hiring process ebbs and flows, and sometimes it kind of, takes 6 months to get picked up. Sometimes it gets picked up a little sooner. And it was just in a longer phase. And while waiting on the right offer from the FAA, the job that I'm in currently kind of popped up.
Is the lag in getting hired by the FAA? Is it the typical government bureaucracy just taking forever to get hired? Because you always hear like there's not enough air traffic controllers.
No, it's a workforce number thing.
Okay.
So it just depends on where they're saturated, where their retirement, I guess, census is. How many folks do they lose in this year to retirement, and what their projections are. So either they're snapping people up pretty quickly, or they're full and their projections aren't that a lot of people are retiring this fiscal year, and so it takes quite a bit longer to get picked up.
When you were in the Marines, did you continue to fish and do stuff outdoors, or was there kind of a hiatus during that time?
There was a hiatus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately so, because I was in Buford. That's back when the cobia were running so thick and all these things, and I'd never done any appreciable saltwater fishing. And so I'd never caught a sea trout or a redfish, and those things were very exotic to me at the time. And we spent a lot of time overseas, so there wasn't a lot of opportunity there. So yeah, it was a bit of a hiatus, and it picked back up right at the end of my tenure in the Marines. I started getting back into it, and as I knew I was getting out, and that's something that had been missing for a long time.
Yeah. We interviewed Rob Alexander. I don't know if you know him, but yeah, he kind of talks about the same thing, because when he was a captain at Parris Island, he started fishing down around that area too again. So he kind of says the same thing, though. He growing up fishing, but never fly fished and didn't know anything about it, even though he was surrounded by great fly fishing at the time.
Isn't it wild? I had no idea what a haven it was down there for what I eventually was going to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome place. So you said that as you were waiting to hear from the FAA, that's when another opportunity came up.
Yeah, it did. I heard from some other friends in the Marines about an opportunity up here in Charleston with the group that I still work for in a different capacity. The contractor was hiring. And so we moved up here and took a job with a group that supports the U.S. Antarctic program. So I've been doing that for a long time now. I've switched roles now. I'm back in the government side of that. But it's, that's been 18 years ago.
So what is that
for a while?
The U.S. Antarctic program? I mean, briefly, I guess.
So the National Science Foundation is funded to provide a U.S. Antarctic program as a national entity. And so we support that with some aviation services, air traffic control being one of them. So that's where I found my role there. And then we do some aviation meteorology, ground electronics maintenance, and maintenance on airfields, equipment and comm equipment and things. And then the group I'm with now, they do quite a bit of engineering and IT efforts. And so equipment installation and design, it's kind of all wrapped up into one.
Sounds pretty interesting. And you get to travel there, that's pretty cool.
I do. I spend a few months every year in Antarctica.
So you mentioned photography too. Is that something you picked up as a hobby?
It did.
Okay.
I did. I started as a hobby.
In the Marines or after?
After.
Okay.
So yeah, in the Marines. So it's the desire, I think, started in the Marines there. Overseas, you're trying to kind of explain to people like what it's like. And I'm a big storyteller. I probably go too deep and too long, and it's easier to just paint a picture with photos if you can.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the opportunity to do that when I was in, but when I got out, I got a little camera and really started trying to take that along and just sharing with people back home what I was doing. A lot of people I grew up with, is the kind of thing where like never leave town. Don't experience a lot. I mean, a lot of folks did, but there's quite a few who didn't. And
even where I grew up on Long Island, I would go back and I'd see. I mean, I could almost go back today, and there's people who have gotten barely left Long Island.
Right.
It's like you don't need a passport to leave here, guys. Go explore the world.
Same thing. And I was trying to, show them something about what I was doing down here.
Well, that old, adage, picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Yeah.
So
And they were happy to hear fewer words from me trying to describe it probably. So it started there, and it really got serious when the church we were attending at the time, we were pretty heavily involved in the teen ministry and supporting that, my wife and I. And there was another couple that did wedding photography that served in the same role or a similar role. And they offered to me to come along and kind of be mentored into this thing and this wedding photography thing that they had been doing for a long time and they were very successful at. And I remember thinking, that doesn't interest me at all. In fact, it sounds incredibly stressful, but I can probably learn a bunch from these guys. They were incredibly talented. And so I tagged along with them a few times that summer and kind of got a lay of the land and kind of see what it was like, and instantly fell in love with telling that story. I'm a storyteller. And if I'm sitting and talking to you, or if I'm running through photos from something that we did, I want to show a story and I want to tell that story.
what year was this about? Do you know?
Oh gosh.
So the reason I ask, I'm wondering, was it all digital at that point?
It was all digital.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. This would have been 2009.
Okay. So, I mean, it was all digital, but it was kind of the beginning of the whole digital thing to a degree.
Close enough to the beginning to where, technology's come a long ways from then. So started out with like kind of a really basic setup, and that my wife actually gifted to me as an anniversary gift. She gave me my first SLR camera, and off to the races.
Yeah, it's amazing now what you think that that was capable of then, and what an iPhone's capable of now.
Right.
I mean, my wife loves photography, and she does it all with her iPhone, and like the pictures she gets with her iPhone it blows me away. I mean, she's got a macro lens for it, but I can't believe that phone takes pictures like that. It's crazy.
Is it a little clip-on macro lens?
Exactly.
I've got one of those, and the kids will find bugs in the garden or something and go photo them and go research what that bug is and learn all about it and all. That little clip-on lens is awesome.
So you mentioned that work allows you to travel to Antarctica and New Zealand. First of all, I'm jealous because New Zealand's a place that I've always wanted to visit. The closest I got to New Zealand was when I was in the State Department, and I was at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo in the regional security office there. They needed someone to be the acting regional security officer in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea.
Oh yeah.
And I volunteered to do that, which Port Moresby is definitely not some place I'd recommend anybody going on vacation necessarily.
Right.
But that's the closest I've gotten to New Zealand. Tell me what traveling to New Zealand was like.
Well, I always tell people, if New Zealand's anywhere on your list, bump it up. Like, bump it up. If not to the top, close to it. It's amazing. I feel like it's a second home. When we deploy to Antarctica every year, that's where we go through to get kitted out and get all our extreme cold weather gear and travel via air down to the station I'm at in Antarctica. So I've spent a fair bit of time over the years there. I typically take some time off either on the way down or on the way back and try to get out and about, do some fly fishing in the hills, and done a bit of hunting the past couple of years.
So tell me a little bit, like, the fly fishing that I see there on YouTube looks incredible. Looks challenging, like it's pretty technical.
It is.
Gin clear water.
It's all those things.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. It's incredibly challenging. But that's also coming from, I'm not a trout guy.
Yeah.
Like, my foundation is not trout.
Big fish though.
So big fish, big educated fish. It's almost all spot and stalk fishing. So for 95% of the fishing you're doing is all sight fishing. So you spend more time, you wear boots out. You spend a lot of time walking and looking into water. But it is amazing. The fishing, it's actually quite a bit more pressured than you'd think. There's There are a lot of anglers that travel there and spend 3-4 months,
Wow.
and all they're doing is fishing. And so it can be difficult to find your own space. You're not crowded on places, but the fish don't really get a break.
Sorry, it's difficult to find your own space out west these days.
100%, 100%. So, most of the fish that you get to, unless you put in some real significant effort, are just about fish to every day. But
Dry flies? You catch them on dry flies there?
on both. I mean, there's like trout anywhere. I mean, what I do is I typically run a dry fly across them, regardless of what they're doing, just because I'm hard-headed more than anything.
And it's fun to catch fish on dry flies.
It's fun. And just like anything, trout are eating dry flies or things on the surface as a very small percentage of their diet. So you've got to have kind of a mixed bag to go there. But almost all of it is sight fishing, which is obviously incredible.
So Austin tells me that you experienced a bit of a natural disaster during one of your trips there. Tell me what that was all about.
Yeah. So we have one position that works in Christchurch, the biggest city on the South Island. And so me and my peers at work, we kind of rotate through that position. And so one of the years that I was spending 3 months in New Zealand working was the year that they had a bunch of earthquakes. They had a big earthquake in September of 2010 that was very rural, did quite a bit of damage, but wasn't as significant. It was quite deep, and they had a lot of aftershocks from that, months and months afterwards. And so we were getting pretty regular earthquakes that were, would stand the hair on the back of your neck up and were alarming, but you got very used to. And then in late February of 2011, there was a big one. It happened in the middle of the afternoon. I was staying in a hotel downtown. It was the tallest building downtown.
Wow.
And I was on the next to the top floor, the 25th of 26 stories. So I was in there moving some things out of my room and taking them to the office over by the airport. It was nearing the end of our season. We just had a few flights left to clear people out of Antarctica in preparation for the winter. And right as I had the door open to my room in the hotel is when the earthquake hit. So it was incredibly violent. It threw me outside the door. And, this wall just hits you. It just moves over and hits you. It's just the weirdest thing.
With the whole building moving so much?
The whole building the whole building was just all over the place. And then this wall hits you, and I ended up on my back on the ground, and there was I was in a hallway, and there's a piece of furniture beside me, and it kind of fell on me, and it's, there's a lot of shaking and a lot of moving going on, and it's really incredibly loud. Like it sounds like you're, standing next to a
locomotive,
an airliner taking off. You're right next to the runway when a jet is taking off. And one of the biggest parts of the movement was the up and down movement. So there's a lot of side to side stuff, but the part I think that was culpable for breaking the building that I was in was the up and down. And so the floor would just shoot up to like knee high and then shoot down again, just really fast over and over and over again. And I was just on my back trying to hold this piece of furniture off and like bouncing. And I remember it being so violent that what I thought was happening were those varying pieces of like how hard you were being hit by things. Was the building was collapsing. It was bah, 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 bah. I thought the building was going down, and I was just waiting for lights out. And I remember thinking, I don't want to survive this at the bottom. I don't want to be the guy trapped in rubble. And it stopped, and the building was still twisting and popping, and there's alarms sounding randomly, and there's water pouring in from broken pipes, I assume, in the ceilings and things. And I got up and I realized that I'm never setting foot in this building again. I've been down the stairs in the middle of the night one time from about 2 months prior. There was a shake that woke everybody up and scared us pretty bad, and we all ran down the stairs. I say we all, me and all the other tenants in the hotel that night. So I knew where the stairwell was. The problem is now that everything is pulverized, sheetrock and concrete and all these things, and so there's just dust you can't see. And so I run down the hallway to the stairwell, and I just completely clobber this girl coming the other way. She's one of the maids that's in the hotel, the housekeeping that day, and she stands up and she's in full panic mode. I mean, I was in full panic mode, but it was all internalized, and she was in full panic mode, and it was externalized. So she's, we're going to die. And I'm like, no, just hold on to me. We're going to get out of this. We're going down the stairs. In 90 seconds, we'll be out of this building, and neither of us have to go back in. So I get in the stairwell. It's completely pitch black, and you can't see. And she's hanging on to me. She's over my shoulder and hanging on to me like a sling bag. And I'm running down the stairs, and I can't see my feet. I can't see the stairs. And I'm just taking 3 or 4 steps at a time, just bam, 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 bam.
Were the stairs mostly intact still, at least?
The stairs were fine.
Okay.
That I could see then. And I turned a corner on one of the landings and physically hit something. There was nothing there. I was physically, my forward momentum was checked. And I stopped. And I remember thinking, go, 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 go. What are you doing? You've got to get out of here. Like, run, run, run. And my body didn't respond. Like, I didn't move for probably just a few seconds, but long enough to where the girl that's hanging on to me, she starts prodding me forward. And there's a big gust of wind, and this dust all kind of blows around. And I'm able to now see that maybe 2 strides ahead of me is the last stair in the whole building. And it was on the 23rd story.
Wow.
So there was nothing below us after the 23rd story. So it was just a chasm. Everything had collapsed.
Some sort of sixth sense or divine intervention just kind of stopped you there.
100%. Yeah. I have no explanation for it except that there was divine intervention, and, God had stopped me from falling to both of our deaths at that point because there's something else. I've wondered over many, many years, what is that? But just really felt like there's something else that I have to do, something else I have to complete, some other purpose. And I don't know that I've done that already, or if that's still yet to come. I don't have any idea what that is, but I've honestly believed that that's just what that was that stopped me. So I noticed this, and I push back, kind of reel back away from the edge and into the door that's behind us, which is, if you go in, we entered the stairwell on a door on the 25th floor and went down, 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 down. The door that's now at my back is the same door, just 2 stories down. It's stuck. I can't get it open. So we ended up, I was able to break the handle, the latch on that, and whatever inside broke, and the door opened. And we go into that door, we're onto that floor, and there's a handful of people kind of cowering under a blanket. We kind of collected them. We collected a few other people that are gathering and kind of don't know what to do. We broke a door into a room because we were thinking that the door jamb was the safest. That seems to be something that we had learned somewhere. And
were there aftershocks at this point?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
There hadn't been an aftershock yet. This is all happening pretty fast. So So we get a room open. We're collecting people in that room, and people are having a hard time breathing. There's a lot of just pulverized sheetrock, like I was saying before, and all the air is just really dusty, and people are coughing and hacking, and there's some girls that are having some really hard time breathing. So me and another guy, we're gonna break the window out in the room, giant plate glass, for two reasons: to get hopefully some fresh air, and to be able to signal people down below that we're up here. Now, a lot of the buildings around us they're down. There's piles of rubble, piles of brick, and we can see people out there like climbing amongst the rubble and like digging frantically, and we just know like people are under that. Our building's still moving. It's twisting like it has a waist, and it's popping and cracking, and yeah, it's a mess. And it was very, 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 very hard to break that window. We ended up holding like a big lounge chair in the room, like me and one of the other guys who was hotel staff, and running against the window time and time and time again before we broke it. There was a fire hose on the floor we were on, and we fed that out. Now the fire hose was a garden hose size. We fed that out thinking maybe we can climb down. It didn't even go halfway down. We tied sheets together off the beds and held it out just to flag people down. Some people were looking and pointing up at us, so they recognized we were there. And then a helicopter slid up beside us and just gives us a thumbs up. So like, okay, people know we're here. They know we're stuck. There's a lot going on. The girl that I'd come down the stairwell with, she actually tried to go out on the sheets.
Oh, jeez.
And we had to stop her, and it ended up kind of like having to like physically restrain her. She was completely out of it.
Just wanted to get out of there.
We all did.
Yeah.
And it was, she just had reacted. She wanted nothing to do with being in that building. She tried to get out. And
what are you thinking? Like, I don't know how much longer this building's going to stand.
Any second.
Yeah.
I always knew that at any second was going to be my last. I was incredibly surprised that what I had felt wasn't the building completely collapsing, but I knew the way it had quite a significant lean. I think one corner had sunk 9 meters, something like that, 6 meters. I don't know. It was quite a bit. So the building had a significant lean, and you could see it inside the building and inside the hallways. We collect a bunch of people over time. It's a really long story, but we had one big aftershock. So we had been happy with the fact that people know we're in there. We're gathering resources. We're breaking down doors and getting snacks and water.
Was this all on that one floor?
This is all on the 23rd floor.
Okay.
People are coming down or making their way down from above. And we're going to collect here. We've got water. We've got some snacks out of the mini bars and things. We're going to hang out until rescue gets to us. There was a peaked roof on the hotel. There's no way to get up there and get exit. We can't get down. We're on the inside of a block. There's nothing that's going to reach us. So there are a few of us that are sitting there thinking, I don't know how this is going to work out. And then we had the first big aftershock. And everybody panicked. And okay, there was one big shake, and that was all the tension in the earth releasing. There's going to be aftershocks. We just got to understand that and know that they're going to happen. And then we have another big one. And then it was like, okay, the building's not going to stand much more of these. We've got to get ourselves out because nobody's going to get us. Somewhere in that time, a police car pulled up on the road and parked in the road between us and the Holiday Inn next to us, which was gone at that point. Anyways, they're on the road. We're trying to yell to them, but we're too far away. They can't hear us. So the construction manager had a team in the building that was doing some work on the building. And he was there to try to get his guys out. And he took a can of spray paint, and right in front of the cop car, he spray painted, "Help is on the way." And so that's kind of what we held on to.
Little reassurance.
People
little
know we're
hope.
here.
Yeah.
But then it felt, it was on us to get out, because if we waited too long, the building was going to come down. So there were 4 of us that kind of started to hatch a plan to, like, we got to start making our way down. When the stairwell collapsed, it tore a hole in the wall of every floor, just like you'd walk along a hallway, and there's a giant hole in the wall, and it leads to a chasm that's just rebar and a mess. And so what we found is if we enter through that hole, we can get onto what's left of some of the stairs just on one side and kind of work our way down to the next floor. We had some tools we'd found, and we were able to break doors down to get to the next floor. And we would take everybody we'd gathered. One of the 4 of us would go first and go down that, get the door open, and then follow everybody down one at a time. And a lot of the places, the stairs, it looked like if a cat walked across them, they were gone. And so, I was kind of waiting at every moment for somebody to go, and
Were you
the whole thing.
As you worked your way down, were you collecting more people?
We were, yeah. And some people were still in rooms. I mean, when the building went, you can imagine the building shifts and nothing's square anymore. And so doors are wedged in jams now. So some people were stuck behind doors that we had to kind of chew through. And we had a big piece of pipe that was a leg from some scaffolding, a nail puller, a framing hammer, a couple of things. And it turned out that was exactly the tools we needed to work our way out of the building.
Wow.
And you'd hammer in a nail puller into the side of the door, put the pipe on it, and chew a big piece off, and repeat and repeat and repeat until you broke enough away to where, just with brute force and everybody working, you could open things and get where you needed. We had started our way down because the stairs were gone, but there was an adjacent car park, and you could see that the car park had an external metal stairway. And so one of the hotel staff that was stuck with us said, that's the 10th floor, 13th floor. So, okay, we just got to make 10 stories. It's better than trying to get down 23. Yeah. So we worked our way down. We got to that level finally. And we were able to break out and get onto the roof of the car park. The car park was partially collapsed. And it wasn't the roof was the roof. There was no access off of it. That stairwell actually started 2 stories down and was just like a maintenance stairwell. So there was no access to that. So we were stuck on the roof. But now we were outside of the building. And although it was like a breath of fresh air, it was leaning towards us. It still felt like any aftershock was going to drop the building on us.
The threat wasn't gone.
Right. And at this point, we're in like the middle of the central business district. Like, the equivalent of Times Square in New York City, the busiest part of Christchurch. There's always foot traffic, there's tourists and everything. And it's like, tumbleweeds blowing there. It's quiet. There's nothing going on at this point. This is hours and hours later. It was just very surreal. A helicopter came, couldn't get us, but signaled to us that he was leaving. He comes back a little while later with a crane. He'd found a crane in town. The crane put a basket up on the roof, pulled us all 5 at a time, and we ended up on terra firma.
So by the time you had gotten to this point where they were finally coming and getting you guys out of there, how many people had you gathered by that point?
We had like 28 people, if I remember the count right. It was just shy of 30 people that we had collected on the way down. Yeah.
Was anybody lost in the hotel? I mean,
surprisingly, no.
Wow, really? Okay, that's
so. When that stairwell collapsed, there was a lot of structural problems in the hotel. It broke at the 10th floor and sunk on one of the corners pretty heavily, and that's what caused all the problems. But when that stairwell collapsed, it shot down, and then all the rubble hit the ground floor and blew out in the lobby. And there was a restaurant and everything down there. This was at right around just shy of 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And so nobody was in the stairwell when it collapsed, which was
pretty amazing.
Incredible. And I remember weeks after watching and just waiting for like a body count out of that building because I'd seen it, firsthand, and it was like a B film horror movie, inside. Just like there's no ways everyone survived that, and they did. There were no losses out of that building.
That's incredible. So, I mean, that seems like an incredibly traumatic experience.
Right.
How would you say that from that point forward, that experience impacted you and your life?
Significantly. Yeah, I mean, out of numerous things that you go through and numerous traumatic experiences, and I've had a handful of significant ones. That's right up there, probably the most impactful in my life. I certainly dealt with some undiagnosed PTSD from that for probably until this day, but for a long time. I was I wouldn't go in large buildings. Every single place I went, I was hunting for the next exit. I was knee deep in earthquake survival research and found all these theories from this scientist who studied the after effects of where survivors were pulled from that showed that you actually don't, door jams aren't the place to be. There's a tiny triangle of survivability that's up against any solid object. So essentially, if you're lying in bed and an earthquake hits, the best thing you can do is just roll out of bed and lay flat next to it. Because when everything collapses, more than likely, everything is not going to collapse to nothing. And if there is a structure next to you, there is usually a tiny triangle of open space that isn't completely crunched. And so everywhere I went, I mean everywhere, I picked out where I thought that spot was and had an escape plan. I mean, I came back to Charleston. I had 3 broken ribs and was stuck in New Zealand for a while. And my wife was flying in to meet me from Brisbane when the earthquake happened. So like I got out of there and didn't know where she was. And it was a whole thing. And come to find out they had diverted her flight to Auckland, and we made connection like late that night. We were able to find out where we were, and that goes into a whole nother thing. But I ended up getting back home, had some broken ribs, and we would go out to lunch, and we went downtown Charleston to a place, and it was next to a brick wall, and we sat down and ordered a drink. And then by the time they brought the chips at a little Mexican restaurant, I couldn't be there anymore. Like I had to leave. Just knowing what happened to bricks in earthquakes, having just seen it. And I was pretty jumpy there for quite a long time. And one of the biggest things it did that has results until this day is that it you hear all the time that life is precious, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and no one lives like that all the time. Nobody lives like today's your last day all the time. But that was a really big push for me in that direction. And one of the pushes was my wife and I have been trying to have kids for a while, and we hadn't investigated further on what was going on. It's kind of like, put your head in the sand and ignore it for a while and the problem will go away. Well, it'd been a long time, and we wanted a family, and that was a huge catalyst for us to go and seek answers and to seek help and to seek next steps. And so that is really the reason that we ended up going down the road that we did with fertility treatments and all these things and all these testings, and eventually ended up in adopting. And we adopted both our kids now. So it
was a catalyst for that. I mean, the PTSD there was a negative and sort of I guess you could say there was a positive that came out of it.
100%. It certainly had long-reaching effects on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At what point did you start to address the negative sides of it? Or how, you know, have you at this point, or did it just kind of, has it sort of faded away, or did you start to do things to help you get past it, or at least deal with it better?
Yeah, it lessened for sure over time. I mean, I think anything does on its own, but it doesn't address the underlying factors. So 7 years after the earthquake, there was a newlywed couple from New Zealand that was trapped up there with me. And before we started moving to get down, there was a long a long point in time where essentially you're sitting around with people that you don't know and you engage in small talk. So what do you do? It's so weird thinking back on it. Like that's what we had to talk about in the midst of this. But I got to know them, and we kind of gelled together. We built kind of this little relationship, and as soon as we hit the ground, we split. We went our separate ways, and had no idea what happened to them. They ended up becoming moderately famous with their own YouTube channel and all these things. And they had been going to therapy for PTSD for quite a while. And they had always wondered what had happened to me, just like I'd wondered what happened to them. They acted upon it and ended up finding me through a social media campaign that they put out.
Wow.
And it eventually turned into them doing a very small docu-series on finding me and reuniting. They flew to the U.S. for the first time, brought their family. They had 2 kids, and we reunited for the first time. And the first time I ever really dealt with that was sitting around my kitchen table with the stories that I had in my head and thinking, have I inflated these over the years? Like, have these has the caught fish grown in its legend, or are the things that I'm remembering
How it happened.
how it happened?
Yeah.
And I sat at my kitchen table with my wife and this couple, and we talked about it. And my wife is just a witness to this. All these things she'd been hearing from me for years, and probably thinking that there's some level of embellishment. And these two had the same thoughts, even though they were there together. They're like, have we conflated this into something it wasn't? And they had the same concerns. And we had memories that mirrored each other's, and things that they remembered that were little points that I didn't, and vice versa. And it was part of the first time that I had really addressed anything and understood what was going on. It was a bit of a therapy session there. They had spent some real time with real therapists, and dealing with their situation with that, and understanding what that was. And I hadn't really never taken those steps.
So from that point forward, I mean, did you start to take steps on your own? You had mentioned that some of the things your photography and things that you do outside also started to kind of help you out. Did you start to take steps on both the therapy side and then like spending time outside that helped you out?
I did. I never sought actual therapy with a therapist. Probably should have, but I sought my therapy in the marsh. So when I can go and get outside and get away from all the little stressors in life and everything, it's like a big reset button for me. So kind of the way that I operate even to this day is, stressors pile up in life, personal stressors and professional stressors, and every little thing that contributes to that. And my wife is really great about understanding this, and she'll see it in me sometimes, and she's like, "You need to go take the boat out. You need to go take the boat out." And I'll find I've got some really good friends. We kind of probably self-address the same issues in a similar way, and I know I can snag them, jump out in the skiff, run outside and goof around for 3 or 4 hours in the marsh here, and it's a breath of fresh air. You get to vent if you need to somebody that you care about and that cares about you, that understands what you're going through because you've known them for a lot of years, and you sort of turn a blind eye to the things that you're dealing with, and I think that's really helpful. Just time away from the inundation of everyday stressors that just don't seem to stop.
Yeah, I mentioned this in one of the other podcasts. In Japan, they actually, a doctor will, if somebody comes in and they're suffering from trauma or depression or anxiety or whatever it may be, they'll actually write their prescription that they will write is for them to go spend time outside.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because the science backs it up.
Yeah, science absolutely backs it up. I think just in general, humans are quick to medicate, and
there's a whole
that goes a whole other direction.
And believe me, I part of me wants to go there because the answer. It's just the way the whole system is designed. It's the answer is to give them a pill, write a prescription, and get them out the door.
Right.
And that's not the answer. For some, it is. For some, it's part of the answer. But getting outside, friendships, camaraderie. Yeah. That's where the real, for me, and from what I've personally witnessed, that's where the real healing happens.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Setting yourself up with a community that supports you, and that you support in turn. That's a reciprocal thing. It's not a one-way street. You get in deep in your community when you need them, and vice versa. You're there for them when they need you, and that and time outdoors. You unplug from all this. I really believe that we weren't designed to handle the stressors of the entire world. We're not meant to be able to deal with the stressors that are in our everyday life, and also global stressors that we're aware of just because of modern technology. Everything going on in the world, whether you're tuned into that or not, if you just have general awareness of it, that's feeding into everything that stresses you out in life and causes all these problems, or is at least adds to all these problems, and being able to put that behind you, get outside, fresh air, sunlight, camaraderie. It's massive. It's the only thing that's worked for me. I haven't done a lot to do anything. I haven't done a lot. Like I was mentioning, I haven't sought out any therapy for that stuff I was going through a long time ago and everything. I self-medicated with my own prescription, and I don't necessarily advise that, but it's worked for me. And like you said, there's science that backs it, that getting outdoors and getting away from these things that we've created technology-wise is a huge benefit.
Yeah, it's the whole 24-hour news cycle and the internet and social media, and it's just it is too much. And I think that if people would spend less time on that and more time outside, we'd be a much better place than we are right now.
Yeah.
As far as globally, not just in the U.S., but globally. But,
yeah.
We can't solve all the world problems right now. But
no.
So I do, before we finish up, I do have to ask you about this because Austin mentioned it. So I understand that they recognized what you did for them there in New Zealand, and there's actually a statue there of you, from what I understand. What's that all about?
No, there's no statue of me there. Interestingly enough, there was a docuseries done by one of the local TV stations in New Zealand. It was called "Help Is on the Way," which is what the was spray painted on the road outside the hotel, and so I got to meet a lot of the people that were involved again. So the chief of police, the officer that was in the car, the guy that operated the crane that took us down, some of the construction workers that were the catalyst that got us up and moving, and I just kind of got caught up in that flow. And those guys are the real reason we got out of that building that day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
The real heroes.
yeah, really are.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that story.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on and sharing that. And, again, just if we could encourage people that watch this to take that first step to get outside, try it and find an outdoor pursuit that you're interested in, whether it's fishing or hiking or photography, whatever it might be, and getting involved with that community of people that do that. I really, as we both just said, that's really a great step towards healing and building resilience, I think. So
Absolutely.
Before we finish up, is there anything you want to add or anything that you wanted to?
Thanks for having me. I mean, I love to tell that story because I hope it's impactful somewhere. Specifically the earthquake story. That's probably the biggest one in my life. And, a lot of good things came out of that situation. And, so just hoping that maybe somebody finds inspiration there, that, you're faced with a bad situation or something has befallen you. And, there's a lot to say about coming outside of that on the other end and looking forward into what you have coming down the road, into better things ahead. And I mean, I likely wouldn't have the family that I do right now without that event happening in my life. Yeah. So I can't imagine it going any other way. And so, everybody's got a story to tell. Everybody's got a lot going on. And some people have some very significant and poignant events in their life that they can reach out or think back to that have made an indelible mark on them. And whenever you weather those storms and you come out the other side, you're better for it. And, I think that the whole idea of what you guys are talking about in this podcast is a really great message to get out to people. And I hope that, maybe that story that I shared plays a little bit of a part of that.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Well, thanks a lot. It was a great story and appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having us.
Well, that was incredible, Jeremy. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well, that was an incredible story, Jeremy. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.